It was a big week for former football star O.J. Simpson. After almost 9 years in prison for armed robbery of sports memorabilia in a Las Vegas hotel, he won parole. He should be out by October. Now, Simpson, of course, was already well known for his legal troubles of more than 2 decades ago. He was charged with the murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. After an 11-month trial, Simpson was acquitted, thanks in part to what became known as his dream team of lawyers. One of those lawyers is F. Lee Bailey. He was watching this week's parole hearing, and he joins us now for his reaction. He's joined us from Maine. Mr. Bailey, thank you for making the time for us today. I would really like to begin by getting your reaction to O.J. being granted his freedom. He'll be out by October.
Well, you're using the term loosely, I'm afraid. Here in the States, being paroled does not mean freedom. It means you are under rather strict supervision and can be yanked back into prison for even the smallest infraction. So it's kind of like walking on eggs. I do think O.J. has demonstrated in the past that he's capable of compliance with whatever's laid on him. He was an excellent prisoner. The guards liked him. The inmates liked him. As he said in his hearing, I did everything I could to fit with the system, and I think he will again.
When the decision was being made on Thursday and we were carrying that parole hearing live, some of the people we were speaking to on CBC News Network were saying that O.J. Simpson wasn't demonstrating any remorse, that he had a bit of a standoffish attitude. You know him, you've known him for a long time. What was your read of how he presented himself at that parole hearing?
Well, the parole board got off to a bad start. They suggested to him two problems he did not have. One was an alcohol problem he never has had, and the other was brandishing a weapon. He never had a weapon, and he testified for the first time. He has never appeared on the witness stand in either case. He testified for the first time that he didn't know the other two had weapons. And one of the victims came on television and said, I listened to O.J.'s story, and every word of it was true.
Talk to me about that, because one of those victims was, of course, Bruce Fermong, and he came forward and said, O.J. Simpson, despite having robbed me of my property, he's a friend. If he needed a ride somewhere, if he called me, I would be there for him. Do you think that was the clincher for the parole board, hearing the victim say, I believe the guy?
Well, those things always help. But the fact is, I think they went into the hearing with a predisposition to grant parole because he matched the checklist so well, unless something came up in the hearing to change their minds. That's the way appellate courts work. A lot of the time they read the briefs, reach a conclusion, and say, okay, lawyers, now in oral argument, i.e. the hearing, let's see if you can change my mind. And in this case, nobody did anything to change their mind. O.J.'s account of what happened that day, although rather rambling, matches everything I knew about it from talking with him at the time, and it's been endorsed as the truth by someone who would normally be seen as a hostile party. So I hope that for a change, the public will accept what's happening instead of saying everybody was stupid, everybody was racist, and he got away with something. He surely did not.
Well, I want to talk to you about that because, of course, many people would remember your name and your presence in what was described in the 1990s and to this day as the trial of the century, the case against O.J. Simpson, where he was accused of murdering his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. Now, you were part of that legal dream team. You managed to present the argument that got him acquitted, found him not guilty from a jury of 12. And I wonder what you thought all those years later in 2008 when he's convicted for kidnapping and armed robbery. Were you disappointed in the man?
I thought it was a stupid caper. I thought he got lured into it. O.J. is not a violent man. I don't think he would ever form an intent to commit armed robbery, but the jury said he did. Now, I think that jury was very badly tainted. 6 of its members had said in writing, we think he's guilty of murder, but we'll give him a fair trial here in Nevada. That's the biggest batch of BS I ever heard, and yet the lawyer let them sit, and worse, the judge let them sit. She did not do a good job.
You know, sir, that's so interesting because one of the criticisms of the trial back in California was that 8 of the 12 jury members were African American women, and they had responded very favorably to O.J. Simpson at the time. So there was concern even with that initial trial that perhaps things were skewed and not as fair as they would be. And I really would like for you to take us back as much as you can to 1995. What was that experience? That took up a good chunk of your life, a whole year at least of your life. What was that experience like for you?
It was a lot more than a year. As a matter of fact, the jury in the Simpson case was basically intelligent. The forelady was a deacon of the church, had a college degree. There was no racist component that we could dig out until the prosecution presented Mark Furman, who was one of the worst racists ever spawned in America. It was my job to show that. He got caught badly. He had to plead guilty to perjury. I think many people, certainly one juror who's spoken out, believe that Mark Furman planted the glove, without which there would have been no case. And therefore, unfortunately, for all of those expecting a conviction who were badly surprised, they blame me, they blame the jury. I can only say, to its credit, that in Canada, I felt none of that prejudice. In the United States, it was palpable. Judges and lawyers with whom I had been friends for years ostracized me, criticized me for, I quote, prostituting my talents to help a guilty SOB.
Wow, that is a lot to take on. I want to dig into that a bit deeper, sir, but I do want to clarify for our audience that may not remember some of the details of the case. Mark Furman was, of course, a member of the LAPD. He was a detective called on the night when Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were reported dead and their bodies were found at her property. He was an officer who had a history of making racist remarks and in fact had lodged a complaint saying he could no longer be a police officer because he felt such animosity towards African Americans. And then, as you rightly mentioned, part of the argument in your defense became that he was accused of planting that glove. But I just want to clarify that for folks. But really, race was central to this trial, to the story. It's really the reason it got so much attention, not only in the United States, but really right around the world. This was a trial about American culture. And you've mentioned that you lost friends and you were ostracized by people you cared about and people that must have respected you at some time, that you respected them. What sort of emotional toll did that take on you?
Well, I won't say it wasn't severe because it was ongoing. It cost me the license to practice law. It cost me a big lawsuit with the federal government before a judge who should never have been on the bench, put me in jail for 44 days on civil contempt. They said I took money belonging to the government. That was absolute nonsense. And you will note they never brought criminal charges because that would have exploded their theory. They did not want to lose their pet judge, and I had to get rid of him by withdrawing my claims against them in that court. But it's an unpleasant phenomenon. Here, an inexperienced, ill-prepared press, primarily television people who deal, unfortunately, except in programs like Our 60 Minutes, and I'm sure you have your own magazines, they deal in snippets. And they bought into most of what the prosecution said, and they published it. Now, when the verdict was coming in, I had warned executives, parents, and newsmen. Do not expect a conviction. It's not going to happen. You're not listening to me. You're going to look like a fool when the verdict is opened. They're going to reach a verdict within 3 days. They reached a verdict within 1 day. Nobody in the world likes an "I told you so," and maybe I did a little too much of that. But I think there is little room in this world for a press that is so fatuous that it doesn't do its homework. if any of your viewers and listeners would like to take a look at what really happened in the O.J. case and how the prosecution effectively prevented the defense from putting on the guts of its case, I have posted on Bailey and Elliott, all one word, no punctuation, .com, a BaileyandElliott.com, an extensive explanation of what happened. I prepared the case from day one. I was there right through the verdict, and I watched all the repercussions. And I'm sad to say I watched the American press lead the public to believe that the jury was racist, that they were stupid.
Mr. Bailey, let me jump in for 1 second, because in 1995, you argued successfully that O.J. Simpson did not murder those two people. Do you
That's
believe
right.
he is innocent of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman?
Well, I believe that forever. I'm offering your people a chance to look at it for themselves. That post has been out there for 7 years, and no one has ever contradicted it. So,
who do you think is responsible for their deaths?
I think the responsibility is Mark Furman's. He was on the case. He had a really big case. Everybody knew he liked the big case, and then he got taken off in favor of two senior detectives. So he quickly found a way to stay in the case. And I'm quoting Furman on tape when he was asked if they were going to get rid of him because of his racist background.
But that's
which,
part
by
of the
included...
Sorry, sir, that's part of the investigation.
Don't interrupt me. Do not interrupt me, please.
But I just want to clarify my question, because it may not have been clear. Who do you think killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman?
I think the same as the FBI. They thought it was a drug deal where the target was Faye Resnick. And I think Mark Furman unquestionably planted the glove, because I have his own words to that effect on tape. And yet the public just doesn't get it, because the press has told them not to get it. That's a shame.
Do you regret representing O.J. Simpson?
No, I think it's a lawyer's duty to take cases that are unpopular as well as those that are popular or publicly innocuous. And you can get opprobrium for that. I certainly have. I've got a thick skin. I was a Marine fighter pilot in the Korean War, and all these little nits and picks, small potatoes against being shot at or landing on a carrier.
Well, that absolutely sounds like small pittance to what you've already been through. So O.J. Simpson was found not guilty on October 3rd, 1995. He was found guilty of armed robbery on October 3rd, 2008. And potentially on October 1st of this year, he will walk out of a prison as a free man. Will you get in touch with him at that time?
That's totally up to him. O.J. has 5 years to jump through hoops from whatever bureaucrat has charge of his supervision. And they have discouraged him in the past from talking to me while he was in prison, because I am the most vocal critic of the Nevada proceedings, which I think left much to be desired. Whether that ban will continue as long as they have their hooks into him and can revoke his parole, time will tell. But the ball is in his court. I would not want to do anything that would cause him to get revoked.
You were one of his best advisors many, many years ago. What advice would you give O.J. Simpson today?
Just go on being O.J. O.J. Simpson is an amiable, affable, nice guy. And very frankly, I have had emails from around the world coming on the fact that in his presentation before the parole board, they saw a personality that could not have murdered anybody. If O.J. Simpson committed a murder, he would do it by talking you to death.
Okay, fair enough. Sir, thank you so much for your time and your insight. And maybe we'll speak to you again once O.J. is out of prison. Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Okay, bye.
O.J. Simpson's former defense attorney, F. Lee Bailey, speaking to us from Maine.